All right. Welcome back, Peter.
Yeah.
Another podcast 25. And this time we are doing The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to do the usual book summary and then we can start diving into the chapters and so on. Okay, so The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari is a fictional story about a man named Julian Mantle, a successful lawyer who faces death. From that, he realizes he needs to change his ways. Through a discussion with a friend, John, Julian passes on the wisdom that he gained through his personal odyssey. Along his journey, he encountered a wise sage in the Himalayas who tells him a fable. The fable has 7 memorable moments, each moment a reminder of how to live a meaningful life. Yeah, that's pretty much the high-level overview. This person, Julian Mantle, goes on this odyssey and then he meets these sages and then he tells that story. Peter, I don't know if you have any additional comments to add there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know if you preface by saying that it's not typical book that we sort of read. Yeah. I mean, we both, before, I think we didn't read up much about what the book is about. We all thought it was kind of a real life story, and then when we started reading it, then realized that it's actually fictional tale. But having said that, it just has a different perspective of framing life lessons. So as much as it's sort of a fiction-esque story, the lessons are actually very practical to one's life.
Yeah. It's weird because, like you say, both of us thought that it was a normal, like, self-help type book, and we start reading it and it's actually a fictional story. I think it's just because it's a very popular one, and the guy Robin, if you look at the back, you'll see he does kind of look like he maybe was a monk at one point, and so it just we thought it was a legitimate real life story, but actually it's just a fictional tale. But still, it's very interesting. And yeah, I think also something worth noting is like the usual caveat with these kinds of things, where it's something that if you want to read the story, then there will be spoilers in this episode. So cut off now. You're free to go. But yeah. And then maybe another caveat is just in the story, there's a lot of like the Eastern mysticism, enlightenment, nirvana type of ideas, which I think is completely fine and makes sense in this kind of a book. So I'm not going to comment on that all the time, even though I do find it a little bit strange. But that's, I suppose a lot because of very westernized world and culture that we've been brought up in. And so those kind of enlightenment topics, I'm not going to do any random caveats, or I'll try to restrain myself from doing random caveats as we're going through it. Cool. Should we start digging in?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can start on page 1. What I'm going to do is as we've kind of been doing recently, I'm going to basically jump through a whole bunch of little snippets for that chapter, and then we'll chat through them. So if it's a quick fly through, then that's why. So starting on page 1, this is now about Julian Mantle. He collapsed right in the middle of a panicked courtroom, one of the country's most diligent trial lawyers. Then on page 4, serving in it as, and now this is John, his friend, serving as his junior was often an exercise in frustration, leading to more than a few late-night shouting matches. It was truly his way or the highway. This man could never be wrong. However, beneath his crusty exterior, was a person who clearly cared about people. Then to page 5. Julian's reputation for brilliance spread, and his workload continued to increase. The cases kept on getting bigger and better. Julian, never one to back down from a good challenge, continued to push himself harder and harder. It soon became clear to me that he was being consumed by the hunger for more prestige, more glory, more money. He achieved everything most people could ever want, and his prized possession, a shiny red Ferrari, parked in the center of his driveway. Then on page 6, there we were, 2 slaves to the clock, toiling away on the 6th floor of some steel glass monolith, while most sane people were at home with their families, thinking we had the world by the tail, blinded by the illusionary vision of success. The more time I spent with Julian, the more I could see that he was driving himself deeper and deeper into the ground. Though he had every material possession anyone could want, he still had not found whatever it was that he was looking for, and it showed emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And then lastly, on page 8, and then it happened, a massive heart attack that brought the brilliant Julian Mantle back down to earth and reconnected him to his mortality. Yeah, he basically, this brilliant lawyer consumed by work, and then he has a heart attack. Yeah, I think it's a very engaging way to start off a story, and you want to kind of find out more. So
yeah. I mean, there wasn't much to the first chapter, but just saying how this lawyer had a heart attack. I mean, I think by then as well you didn't know what the connection is besides the whole line of the red Ferrari parked in the driveway, then you'd be like, okay, the story then definitely revolves around this guy.
Yeah. So should we then jump to the next chapter, The Mysterious Visitor?
Yeah.
So I'm going to do the same thing. So on page 10, that was the whole episode just over 3 years ago. Or that whole episode was just 3 years ago. Last I heard, Julian had headed off to India on some kind of expedition. He had sold his mansion, his plane, and his private island. He had even sold his Ferrari. In my quiet moments, I often thought of Julian and wondered what had become of him in the years since he had unexpectedly parted the company. Then 11. There's someone here to see you, John. I'm on my way out the door, Genevieve. I don't have time to see anyone right now. But he says he really needs to see you. He refuses to take no for an answer. Okay, send him in, John said. But there was more to the visitor than is you. Okay, then the visitor comes in, and then it cuts, or I'm going to cut to a point where he says, but there was more to the visitor than his youthful good looks. So this person looks sort of radiant and everything. And then he says further down, I immediately recognized that raspy, honey-smooth voice. My heart started to pound. Julian, is that you? I can't believe it. It's really you. And then a loud laugh from the visitor confirmed his suspicions. I was dazzled by the incredible transformation. Gone was the ghost-like complexion of the sickly cough and the lifeless eyes of my former colleague. He was no longer the anxious type A senior partner of a leading law firm. Instead, the man before me was a youthful, vital, and smiling model of change. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Just, I guess, this mysterious visitor turns out like he's so changed that he's almost unrecognizable, and then it turns out to be Julian Mantle.
I think just one thing, I don't know if you mentioned it, that when Julian was in hospital after his heart attack, he actually refused to see John as a visitor. John did attempt to go to the hospital to see him a few times, but was refused access. And there's also an interesting, which will make sense in the end when we get there, about how, there was a part in Julian's life that was way before John even joined the firm, where apparently Julian was in a dark spot, but no one knows or ever spoke about what exactly happened during that time, and he always wondered. But yeah, that also sort of be answered. I think in the last chapter is only when you find out what happens around that time. But yeah, I just thought maybe those are a few things from this first chapters to add for just a bit of context to the whole story.
Yeah, nice. So then we can jump to chapter 3. That's the miraculous transformation of Julian Mantle. And yeah, so start on page 14. Julian was the first to speak. He told me that the hyper-competitive legal world had taken its toll on him, not only physically and emotionally, but spiritually. The fast pace and endless demands had worn him out and had run him down. Julian 15. Julian grew visibly excited as he recounted how he sold all his material possessions and headed for India, a land whose ancient culture and mysterious traditions had always fascinated him. Then on 17, he had the good fortune to meet a gentleman named Yogi Krishnan. And then page 19, I need your help, Krishnan. I need to learn how to build a richer, fuller life. I'll be honored to assist you in any way I can, offered the yogi. But may I give you one suggestion? Sure. For as long as I have been caring for this temple in this little village, I have heard the whisperings of a mystical band of sages living high in the Himalayas. Legend has it that they have discovered some sort of system. It's supposed to be a holistic, integrated set of ageless principles and timeless techniques to liberate the potential of the mind, body, and soul. Then on 20, all I can tell you is that the locals in this village know them as the great sages of Savannah. In their mythology, Savannah means oasis of enlightenment. Julian set out on his trek to the lost land of Savannah. And then 22. As he traveled for more than 2 days, Julian's thoughts wandered back to his former life. As he ventured deeper into the depths of the mystical place, his reflections of the past were quickly interrupted by stunning marvels of the moment. From the corner of his eye, he saw another figure, dressed strangely in a long flowing red robe topped by a blue hood. Please, friend, I need your help to find Savannah, yelled Julian. I've been traveling for 7 days with little food and water. I think I'm lost. The figure came to an abrupt stop. Then, a little bit later, his olive complexioned skin was supple and smooth. His body looked strong and powerful, and though the man's hands gave away the fact that he was not young, he radiated such abundance of youthfulness and vitality that Julian felt hypnotized by what appeared before him. Then the next page, Julian opened his heart and poured out his odyssey to the traveler. He spoke of his former life and the crisis of spirit he struggled with, how he had traded his health and energy for fleeting rewards that his law practice brought him. The man said gently, If you truly have a heartfelt desire to learn the wisdom of a better way, then it is my duty to help you. I am indeed one of those sages that you have come so far in search of. You are the first person to find us in many years. Congratulations. I admire your tenacity. You must have been quite a lawyer, he offered. And then lastly, on 26, before I take you into our private world and share our collected knowledge, fulfilling your life with more joy, strength, and purpose, I must request one promise from you, the sage said. Upon learning these timeless truths, you must return to your homeland in the West and share this wisdom with all those who need to hear it. Yeah, it's interesting that it seems like quite often they talk in the book about sharing this wisdom, and that's the thing that Julian's sort of almost life goal becomes.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any thoughts. I know that it was quite a jump through there, but
Yeah, it was quite a jump through, but I think just my take from it was just how Julian was so determined to get to this place that he had heard of when he was in India. I think that's what stood out for me, that despite everything, being told that people have never found this place and everything, he then set out to find this place, and and I think that's not what happens often. People like looking back to their old life and actually making that 180 turn to be like, okay, I need to move away from my ordinary life. Because I mean, if you really hear about his life before then, it seems like he was doing well. He was one of the top players. I think he was a partner at the firm. So he was quite high up, and you'd think that, he ends up getting rid of everything to, quote unquote, find himself, in a far distant land. And not only that, once he gets there, he hears stories of, other people that are tucked away deep in a land where no one actually attempts to go to, and he's like, okay, I will find them, and learn of their ways. So it's just his determination that stood out for me at that point.
And it's like, you kind of, when going on these like spiritual odyssey type of things, you kind of think, oh, it should be natural and just like happen, but actually had to sort of have determination and grit to get to that point. So it was an interesting observation. Right, so then going to the next one, which is a magical meeting with the sages of Savannah. Starting on page 28. After walking for many hours, the sage looked at Julian and smiled gently. Welcome to the Nirvana of Savannah. Then the next page. Julian's traveling companion, who now revealed that his name was Yogi Raman. He explained that he was the eldest sage of Savannah and the leader of this group. The men who appeared to number so then goes on to talk about the place. The men who appeared to number only about 10, each looked so calm and healthy and deeply contented. Then on 30, ultimately the faces of the sages of Savannah revealed the power of their way of life. None of them had a grey hair. None of them looked old. And then, it goes on to talk about how they ate and did things, and But essentially he sees these sages and he realizes, like, okay, they must be doing something meaningful, because whatever they're doing, they look way younger than they should be looking. And Julian obviously looks the same to John, so we know that something is up. He's definitely done something.
I mean, it is mentioned somewhere in the book that it's definitely their diet, which is also quite an interesting section.
Part,
Again, I agree that, it was, I think for him as well, confirmation that he might be in the right place to be like, this guy that says he's the oldest, I look older than him, but I'm barely half his age, so,
No, it's, and I think in some sense we need that reassurance to continue on with the journey that we go on, because if you don't have that, you're like, okay, well, why would I trust these people? Okay, so then the next part is a spiritual student of the sages. So this is just looking at Julian and what happens over there. So I'll run through again a few. So starting on page 32. It was now 8 p.m. and I still had to prepare for my court appearance the next day. This is John speaking. But sensing my fascination with his odyssey, Julian quickened the pace as he continued his tale. He told me how his desire for knowledge, coupled with his sharp intellect, had made him a well-loved member of the Savannah community. Julian spent literally every waking moment under the tutelage of Yogi Raman. Then on 34, Julian said that the first indications of his personal expansion came after only 3 weeks. He started noticing the beauty in the most ordinary of things. But I have learned self-mastery, and this is now on 35. But I have learned that self-mastery and the constant care of one's mind, body, and soul are essential to finding one's highest self. How can you care for others if you cannot care for yourself? How can you do good even if you don't feel good? I can't love if I cannot love I cannot love you if I cannot love myself, he offered. Noticing that it was getting late, Julian quickly told me that he would take his leave and bid me adieu. I'll be back, rest assured, my friend. Every one of us should know the philosophy of the sages. Every one of us can benefit by it. Yeah. I don't think that there's too much to go over there. It's basically just the sort of cutting into Julian telling John this initial part of this story, and it's going to start sort of digging into it more from here. Should we head to the wisdom of personal change?
Yeah, okay.
Cool. Okay, so then there's a nice quote here from Suzuki, which says, I am an artist at living. My work of art is my life. And I thought that that's a nice idea. Like the life you are living is or should be a work of art, because the things that you do in it should have the meaning and value that you can look at it as that, a work of art. But yeah, don't know if I've achieved that, but it's a good point to strive to. Okay, so 38 picks up. True to his word, Julian showed up at my home the next evening, about 7:15. Let's get started. I could hardly get anything done at work today. I was so excited about our meeting, John said. He looked at me for a long moment. This is now on 41. Please don't take this the wrong way. I really respect you, John. I always have. However, just like this cup, you seem to be full of your own ideas, and how can any more go in until you first empty your cup? So that idea is passed around quite a bit. Just the idea of having an empty cup that can be filled, not to be mistaken with the view of having a glass half empty versus full. It's a different thing. Then on 42, John, tonight is the first night of your life. I simply ask you to think deeply about the wisdom and strategies that I will share with you, and apply them with conviction for a period of 1 month. There's a reason why they have survived for thousands of years. They work. Then on 43, once you see the power of the strategies and skills shown to me by the sages of Savannah, and observe the dramatic results they will bring to your life, you must make it your mission to pass this wisdom on to others who will benefit from this knowledge. By agreeing to this, you will help me fulfill my own pact with Yogi Raman. Then on 45, Yogi Raman told me that the 7 virtues of a life overflowing with inner peace, joy, and wealth of spiritual gifts were contained in a mystical fable. This fable was the essence of it all. Now I'm going to read the fable. It's a little bit long, but I think it's a worthwhile read, because this is kind of, if there's any point in the podcast where you listen carefully, this is the point, because this fable is kind of what everything else hinges on. So the fable goes like this. You are sitting in the middle of a magnificent, lush green garden. The garden is filled with the most spectacular flowers you have ever seen. The environment is supremely tranquil and silent. Savor the sensual delights of this garden and feel as if you have all the time in the world to enjoy this natural oasis. As you look around, you see in the center of this magical garden stands a towering red lighthouse, 6 stories high. Suddenly, the silence of the garden is disturbed by a loud creaking as the door at the base of the lighthouse opens. Out stumbles a 9-foot-tall, 900-pound Japanese sumo wrestler who casually wanders into the center of the garden. "It gets better," chuckled Julian. The Japanese sumo wrestler is almost totally naked. He has a pink wire cable covering his private parts. As the sumo wrestler starts to move around the garden, he finds a shiny gold stopwatch, which someone had left behind many years earlier. He slips it on and falls to the ground with an enormous thud. The sumo wrestler is rendered unconscious and lies there, silent and still. Just when you think he has taken his last breath, the wrestler awakens, perhaps stirred by the fragrance of some fresh yellow roses blooming nearby. Energized, the wrestler jumps swiftly to his feet and intuitively looks to his left. He is startled by what he sees. Through the bushes at the very edge of the garden, he observes a long, winding pathway covered by millions of sparkling diamonds. Something seems to instruct the wrestler to take the path, and to his credit, he does. This path leads him down a road of everlasting joy and eternal bliss. And then cut back to Julian. After hearing the strange tale high atop the Himalayas, Julian was disappointed. Quite simply, he thought he was going to get some earth-shattering knowledge. Yogi Raman detected his dismay. "Never overlook the power of simplicity," Julian was told. And then on the next page, 47, the garden, the lighthouse, the sumo wrestler, the pink wire cable, the stopwatch, the rose, and the winding path of diamonds are the symbols of the 7 timeless virtues for an enlightened life. When you apply this wisdom on a daily basis, you will change mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So I think anyone hearing that story for the first time will be very confused by it, and justifiably so. But over the rest of the book, those different symbols are kind of opened up. I don't know if you have any points you want to chat through there before we dive into the first symbol.
Nothing to add. It's just that I think it took me a while not a while, but it just kind of was just questioning how the symbols all make sense, But then, and I think, we'll go into that now. The chapters that follow actually have very good chapter summaries at the end that kind of say what virtue was being discussed, and then kind of what the overview of the chapter was. But even with that, there's also some other things deep within the chapter that actually expand further on what that virtue symbolizes and stuff. But this was, I think, I don't have much to add. Again, like I said, the fable will make sense as you read on, which shows pretty much what the chapter surrounded on. I think it was just the other thing to note there was just how excited John was to see Julian again the next day, and how, he was kind of promised that his life would change, and he really was eager to know what it is that Julian knows that changed his life. And I think he had seen the transformation, and again, like we said earlier, it's, I think, that confirmation, and from him it was kind of working backwards to be like, clearly something did work, from how you look to how you look now. There is some sort of transformation, and I do want to know what it is that you did to achieve that transformation.
And I think the story, the fable, is a is a memorable way, because Yogi Raman talks about, like, he thought a lot about how does he share this knowledge.
Yes.
And then he came up with this fable as the best way you could figure out how to share the knowledge. And I think it makes sense as the sort of fable gets unfolded.
And I mean, which goes against when I was reading that part, to be like, we sort of think much into how we want to deliver something across to someone. And I mean, I don't know if it was in this where he kind of lists what he thought it would be like, should I have him together with the other people and like kind of have an exchange or almost
do a bunch of like lessons and things like that,
and then he then went down to something that, if at first glance, like, okay, just that. And again, like, he then ends off the chapter to be like, never underestimate the simplicity of things. And I mean, I think we have spoken about this, that, in our line of work, when we're trying to solve something, it's almost always the simplest solution that we think of that's actually the best one, and what actually but in that moment you'd be like, surely it can't be the case. This is just too simple to actually solve what you're trying to solve for.
I ran into that literally yesterday, where there was like this thing that was like a really complex change that needed to be made. And like I looked at it for quite a while, and I was like, I don't know how, like I'm gonna have to refactor a whole bunch of stuff. And then eventually I was like starting to make the changes slowly, and then I realized like I could actually just change this one line. And then literally I just had to change the one line, and then everything worked perfectly. Like for this biggish change that needed to be done. And those are the best, like when you eventually like see, you can do it this way, and then like everything else becomes like a lot clearer. But it is difficult to find that simplicity. But okay, so then we go on to the first part to the story, and that's about the garden. So I'm gonna again do a bunch of jumping. This is gonna jump through quite a bit because I'm gonna go through the whole garden chapter, and then we can chat through it. Okay, so starting on 49. In the fable, the garden is a symbol for the mind. If you care for your mind, if you nurture it, if you cultivate it just like a fertile, rich garden, it will blossom far beyond your expectations. But if you let the weeds root, lasting peace of mind and deep inner harmony will always elude you. Then on 50, the ones who fan the flames of their human potential and truly savor the magical dance of life to do things differently than those, whose lives are ordinary. Foremost among the things that they do is to adopt a positive paradigm about the world, about their world, and all that's in it. Then on 52, for now, what is important is that you understand that mental mastery comes through conditioning, nothing more, nothing less. Then 53, there is no such thing as objective reality or the real world. There are no absolutes. The face of your greatest enemy might be the face of my finest friend. Then 55, Yogi Raman put it this way: there are no mistakes, only life lessons. Then 56, once you consistently apply this principle to your daily life and start to condition your mind to translate every event into a positive, empowering one, you will banish worry forever. And then 61, the success on the outside indeed begins with success on the inside. By changing his thoughts, Julian Mantle had changed his life. If you have become a negative thinker, it is because you have not cared for your mind and taken the time to train it to focus on the good. The mind is truly like any other muscle in your body. Use it or lose it. And then 62, enlightened thinkers know how their thoughts form their world, and the quality of one life comes down to the richness of one's thought. If you want to live a more peaceful, meaningful life, you must think more peaceful and meaningful thoughts. Quick fixes do not work. All lasting inner change requires time and effort. Persistence is the mother of change. If you diligently apply the strategies I am sharing with you every day, only for 1 month, you will be astonished at the results. But to reach this destination, you must not get hung up on the outcome. Instead, enjoy the process of personal expansion and growth. Ironically, the less you focus on the end result, the quicker it will come. And then there's a caveat that, or a sort of example that he gives, illustration, which is to say, on 63, he says, with one eye fixed on the destination, there's only one eye left to guide you along the journey. So he's essentially saying, put both eyes on the journey. And then jumping all the way to 70, the sages of Savannah took time daily to silently contemplate not only where they were, but where they were going. They took time to reflect on their purpose and how they were living their lives every day. Most importantly, they thought deeply and genuinely about how they would improve the next day. Daily incremental improvements produce lasting results, which in turn lead to positive change. The problem is that once my day gets... This is John talking to Julian. The problem is that once my day gets cranking, I can't even find 10 minutes to eat lunch. My friend, saying that you don't have time to improve your thoughts and your life is like saying that you don't have time to stop for gas because you are too busy driving. Eventually, it will catch up with you. There's one technique for mastering the mind that towers above all the rest. The practice is over 4,000 years. It's called the heart of the rose, and all you need to perform this exercise is a fresh rose and a silent place. And then it's explained that the idea is that you focus on the rose, and whenever your focus deviates, then you go back to the rose and focus on the center of the rose, on the heart of the rose, as they put it. And that helps you to sort of train your attention and your focus. Then almost there, on 75, thoughts are vital living things, little bundles of energy, if you will. Most people don't give any thought to the nature of their thoughts, and yet the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your life. John, I'll be blunt. You truly can't afford the luxury of even one negative thought. And then lastly, 83. It was now 7 minutes past midnight. Remarkably, I didn't feel the least bit tired. When I shared this with Julian, he smiled once again. You have learnt yet another principle for enlightened living. For the most part, fatigue is a creation of the mind. Have you ever had an afternoon at the office where you were reading a dry case of reports and your mind started to wander and you started to feel sleepy? And then he carries on and he says, so your tiredness, John obviously says, yes, I've experienced that. And then he says, so your tiredness was nothing more than a mental creation, a bad habit your mind has cultivated to act as a crutch when you are performing a tedious task. Because he gives examples of other things where, like when his friend says, oh, let's do something together, then all of a sudden he has energy again. And hence he says that's the case where it's a creation of your mind. Yeah, so I think there was a lot of little things that we went through, but I think some of the main points for me was just that idea of caring for your mind and trying to look at things in a positive light, rather than allowing yourself to fall into negative thoughts. And as he kind of says towards the end, you truly can't afford even one negative thought. Because as soon as you start allowing that to creep in, then it's just a dangerous slope to slide down. Yeah, I don't know if you have additional thoughts from your side. I think there was one.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it was quite a long chapter, and I think it had kind of a lot of ideas, put into it. Very similar, but yeah, it was kind of jam-packed with a lot of gold nuggets within it. But yeah, like you said, it's one thing that stood out to me was the whole not allowing negative thoughts to wander within your mind, and I think it was the very first part of I think also where you made the connection of that if you want to kind of do better outwardly, you have to start within, and which is the mind. And I think there's something that they kept referencing, and I think it's spoken about later on about body, mind, and soul, the trilogy as they calls it. But yeah, this was one of the having to take care of your mind, and yeah, I think that was important. And also he kind of says that the one thing that you need to know is that I think we like to think that we are governed by our minds, but in actual fact, we govern the minds, and it's about taking control of our minds. And I think the exercise about staring in the heart of the rose was about gaining control of your mind, and he does say that it would be, and again, it's something that he encourages that one does in the book, and he says it can be hard at first, but with practice and with time, you kind of master that. And I think a lot about the book is about mastering our minds, mastering different things about ourselves, and yeah, I think the Guardian symbolizes the first step in taking charge of your brain. I know with the breakdown of the chapter, I think one of the techniques was also the secret of the lake. I think with that, he was kind of talking about how it's the art of picturing what you want. That's another thing about controlling your mind, that if you desire something, you just don't kind of think of it and then move on. I think you should also, if you can, write it down, or picture it, because only then are you able to start working towards something, I think for me that was also something that's important to be like. And I mean, I was even thinking back to myself, it's something that I always say to myself, oh, this year I need to achieve this, this, and that. And I don't know what I came across last year, but it was a very similar ideology that for something to actually be concrete and set in stone, put it down. And it should be in a place where you actually revisit, and then because only then you know what you're working towards. Because and again, funny enough, it was something that I like telling people whenever they say, I want more money, and I'm like, okay, yes, I hear you. You want more money, we owe to you, but you do realize that whenever you get somewhere, that will never change. There will always be a need of more money, or there will always be room for you to say, I need more money. Up until you sort of kind of put a number to it, to be like, okay, in this particular period, this is how much money I want. That's something that's more realistic, because it's like something you're going to achieve and you plan towards that. But if you just say, I want more money, I can give you R1 more. That's more money than you previously had.
And then when you have that, you'll still want more, unless you actually say, okay, this is what I need, and so therefore that's the goal that I'm aiming for. And once I reach that, I'm gonna choose to say, well, you reevaluate, but also I'm gonna choose to say, okay, that's enough. Maybe I get more money. Okay, great, but I'm not gonna be unsettled. Like once I get to that point, it's like, okay, actually, exactly. I've achieved the thing that I wanted to achieve, and I'm not going to now just turn around and say, no, I want more. But yeah, but it's like they were saying in that section as well about how these sages would spend time thinking and reflecting about what it is that they are striving towards, and also that idea of the quality of your thoughts determines the quality of your life.
Your life, yeah.
And if you have negative thoughts the whole time, you're going to be thinking negative things. If you sort of discipline yourself to try and view things in a positive light, view things and saying like, okay, I can learn from this, I can grow from this, rather than that was a terrible thing that happened. Then slowly it will shift the way that you experience life. Yeah. And that the lake thing, I also like the idea. I'm always hesitant when it comes to those kind of ideas of like, I picture these sort of people with a vision board, and like if I envision it, it's going to happen and stuff like that, and that I unfortunately find a bit cringy. But I think that idea of saying, let me actually put pen to paper, or really sort of figure out what it would be like to get to this point or that point, or whatever the goal that you have is, to sort of spend time to think about that goal and figure out how to take steps towards that. I think that's extremely helpful way of approaching life, because there's some good illustrations like the Archer illustration that I think we'll touch on later, but that help clear those kind of ideas up and really solidify them. But if you don't know what you're aiming for, and I think good luck, I guess. Yeah. All right, should we go to the next illustration? The sumo wrestler. So starting on page 87, this is I'm not going to read the chapters. I'm rather going to talk about the idea, because like, for example, this chapter is kindling your inner fire, but rather I'm going to say like the sumo wrestler, and then we go through the chapter that sort of reflects on that. Okay, so sorry, my bad.
It's not this
yeah, my bad. Going from 87, kindling your fire is the towering lighthouse. So the illustration is the lighthouse, not the lighthouse. Sumo wrestler. Yeah. We'll get to the sumo wrestler. Okay, so the lighthouse, and that's starting on page 87. Many in our society are floating like ships without rudders, weary souls searching for a lighthouse that will keep them from crashing against the rocky shores. You must serve as a captain of sorts. I am placing my trust in you to take the message of the sages of Savannah to all the world who need it. And on 88, basically, the sages of the Himalayas guided their lives by a simple rule. He who serves the most reaps the most, emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually. This brings me to the lighthouse, Julian said, remaining focused on the task at hand. You have now learnt that the mind is like a fertile garden, and for it to flourish, you must nurture it daily. Never let the weeds of impure thought and action take the garden of your mind. In the middle of the garden stood a magnificent lighthouse. This symbol will remind you of yet another ancient principle for enlightened living. The purpose of life is a life of purpose. Then on 89, clearly defining your priorities and goals for every aspect of your life will serve a role similar to that played by the lighthouse, offering you guidance and refuge within the sea when the seas become rough. You see, John, anyone can revolutionize their lives once they revolutionize the direction in which they are moving. Life is funny, observed Yogi Raman. One would think that the less one worked, the more one would have the chance to experience happiness. However, the real source of happiness can be stated in one word: achievement. Lasting happiness comes from steadily working to accomplish your goals and advancing confidently in the direction of life's purpose. Then, on the next page, this is what Yogi Raman said to me. You might wonder what a group of simple, possessionless sages would ever need or hope to achieve. But achievement need not be of the material sort. Personally, my objectives are to attain peace of mind, self-mastery, and enlightenment. If I fail to accomplish these goals by the end of my life, I am certain that I will die feeling unfulfilled and unsatisfied. And then on page 92, a timeless philosophy that prescribes that those things that are most important should never be sacrificed to those things that are least important. Then on the next page 93, Yogi Raman was an expert archer, a true master. To illustrate his philosophy on the importance of setting clearly defined objectives in every aspect of one's life and fulfilling one's mission, he offered a demonstration that I will never forget. 94. Yogi Raman asked Julian to put a handkerchief over his eyes as a blindfold. Have you ever observed me in my daily practice of this ancient sport of archery? The sage inquired. I cannot recall a time that you have ever missed at your current distance, Julian noted dutifully. Then, with his eyes covered by the cloth, his feet placed securely in the earth, the teacher drew the bow with all his energy and released the arrow. The arrow struck the large oak with a thud, missing the mark by an embarrassingly large distance. Then, on the next page, today's demonstration is meant to reinforce my advice on the importance of setting clearly defined objectives in your life and knowing precisely where you are going. What you saw confirms the most important principle for anyone seeking to attain their goals and to fulfill their life's purpose. You will never be able to hit a target that you cannot see. And then on page 100, the sages of Savannah had created a 5-step method, or actually, I'm going to skip past those because, I think that going through each of the different rules and stages and things like that can get a little bit long. But the final step for those interested is enjoy the process. I already kind of like alluded to earlier the story of the archer, but I really like that story or that illustration because I think it clears up the fact that you need something like that lighthouse guiding you, like goals, to say this is what I'm aiming for. And those goals don't have to be to achieve material possessions. They should, in fact, be all three of the different things, sort of mind, body, and spirit. And it's a nice illustration to say, like, whether even in the spiritual realm, if you don't have sort of things that you're aiming towards, how can you expect to achieve meaningful progress? What are your thoughts, Peter?
I think for me it's the whole making your target known. I think we kind of briefly spoke about it before as well. Like, just making something known or just highlighted, is a good way to know what you're working towards. I think that's what stood out for me. I mean, there are many. Again, we didn't go through the steps, but I think one of them was, they said positive pressure. Just kind of encourage yourself towards the goal. It's one way to sort of look at it. And I think also, one thing was like making sure that you find your purpose and work towards it, and I think The one thing that was said was, I think it was, what's his name? Raman kind of telling Julian that, the one thing that would truly kill him or die is when he doesn't achieve his purpose, and it's so strange that, he's lived so long, yet that's one thing, that will break his heart. So yeah, I just thought that was quite interesting.
I mean, he wants to end up being enlightened by the time he passes. Right, should we head over to the sumo wrestler?
Yeah.
So
we've been trying to get to him.
Eager to get there. Yeah, so starting on page 110, it starts off with a quote from Confucius. Good people strengthen themselves ceaselessly. And this idea of the sumo wrestler is someone who's extremely strong and powerful. And then on 111, I'm going to do the jumping through again. So it says here, many centuries ago in the ancient East, great teachers developed and refined a philosophy called Kaizen. The Japanese word means constant and never-ending improvement. Then on 113, and this I like because it jumps back to something that we've already read in the past, or a book that we've read in the past. Epictetus said so many years ago, no man is free who is not a master of himself. And then
I almost knew you're going to quote that when I read it. I was like,
do you know what's funny? Just going back to something earlier, I almost, so there's that point where he talks about tirelessness, being tired being a construct of the mind, and I think that's more true than most people realize that it is. Although there is also a point where
is it not? Was it?
No, it was like in one of the earlier chapters.
Okay.
But where he talks about that, and obviously there's an element of like you actually very tired and so on. But in large part, it's true to be like you thought you were tired, but you actually weren't. And then it reminded me of how to live on 24 hours and in a day, and then. Yeah, there was a part that I wanted to like quote and read, and then I was like, no, Livy, stop. But all of the previous books that we read, it's great when people quote them. Carrying on with the sumo wrestler and the idea of Kaizen and continuous self-improvement. So Epictetus says, no man is free who is not a master of himself. And then Julian says, think about it, John. How could a person possibly lead a corporation if he cannot lead himself? How can you nurture a family if you have not learned to care for yourself? Then on 114, he spoke of the importance of building strength of character, developing mental toughness, and living with courage. 115, courage allows you to run your own race. Courage allows you to do whatever you want to do, because you know that it is right. Then 116. First, I must share a practical illustration with you. Get into a push-up position. And then he goes through this process of doing a whole bunch of push-ups, and then he sort of gives up and he's just like, I can't do it. And then we see this, and then he says, you told me that after you had done 23 that you couldn't do anymore. You told me that this was your absolute limit. Yet, when I challenged you to do more, you responded with another 10 push-ups. You had more inside you when you reached for your resources, and then you were able to receive more. Yogi Raman explained the fundamental truth to me while I was his student. The only limits on your life are those that you set yourself. Again, I think it's mostly true. Caveats I will try and hold back. Then 118. You practice the art of Kaizen by pushing yourself daily. Work hard to improve your mind and your body. Nourish your spirit. Do the things you fear. Start to live with the unbridled energy and limitless enthusiasm. In the East, they say that luck favors the prepared mind. I believe that life favors the prepared mind. And then 21. The sages shared another powerful principle. The philosophy can be stated succinctly. What sets highly actualized people apart from those who never live inspired lives is that they do the things that less developed people don't like doing, even though they might not like doing them either. Truly enlightened people, those who experience deep happiness daily, are prepared to put off short-term pleasure for the gain of long-term fulfillment. They resolve to live by the wisdom of Kaizen, improving every aspect of themselves ceaselessly and continuously. With time, things that were difficult once become easy. Then 24. And what does a 9-foot tall, 900-pound Japanese sumo wrestler symbolize in this fable? Our hefty friend will be your constant reminder of the power of Kaizen, the Japanese word for constant self-expansion and progress. How can I practice this art of Kaizen? I will give you 10 ancient, supremely effective rituals that will lead you far along the path of personal mastery. And then he goes through these 10 rituals of living radiantly. And we are just gonna, for the sake of time and because people should read the book, we will skip past all of them and then jump to page 58. I know that this is another whirlwind. Even getting to 58 is a stretch.
Oh.
There we go. I've got you the final ritual. This is the all-important ritual of simplicity. The ritual requires you to live a simple life. As Yogi Raman once said, life must never live in the thick of things. Only focus your priorities on those activities that are truly meaningful. Your life will be uncluttered, rewarding, and exceptionally peaceful. This I promise you. And then lastly, 162. Having said this, the sages' methods are not of the quick fix kind. They are ageless traditions that are meant to be applied daily for the rest of your days. If you stop applying them, you will find that you will gradually slide back to your old ways. Yeah, so again, a lot of just sort of jumping around and that, but I think that idea of the sumo wrestler being a reminder of the power of Kaizen, that sort of constant striving to improve daily, I think it's an important reminder, and especially that idea of continuing to do it daily. It's not something where you like, okay, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to be better and now I'm better and that's the end. It's a continuous thing that one has to keep on putting effort in, and if one does, then one slowly begins to master themselves to some degree, and that allows them to live a more fruitful life. Yeah. I don't know what your
I mean, just to add, I think apart from Kaizen itself, that whole self-improvement, the idea of self-improvement, that's kind of quite powerful, and I mean, it goes back, with reference in other books a lot, Atomic Habits, goes about, that 0.1% increase a day is far greater than doing nothing, that compounds into something greater, and I mean, there's, I think, many places where it talks about that. Never forget that it takes time to build a habit, and I think there are a few times it's been it's referenced that do something for at least 3 weeks to a month. If you still find that you don't like it, then okay, maybe you really don't like it, and Another thing for me, it's about doing the things that we fear. I was actually not only fear, but things that we don't like. I was
that was a
chatting
very
to
good
someone.
one.
Sorry.
No, I'm just agreeing and saying that was a very good point that was made. Like doing those things that you, even when you don't want to do them and don't like to do them. That's But
and I was saying,
chatting.
I'm back at gym again as well. So it was like I was saying how I do better when I have like a gym partner, because they'll force me to do things that I don't like. But if I go to gym alone, I'll only do the things that I like. And move on. So that for me was kind of like a real thing that I kind of struggle with. And moving on to that, there was the whole thing of, and I think it's also a concept that we've come across and spoken about it. I think not even just as we're reading. I think it's a topic we've discussed before, of just delayed gratification. Do something now, not because you see the rewards now, but for the foreseeable future. And that's one thing that was also mentioned here. And I think that's very important. And I think I feel like I've deviated away from it, and it's something that I feel like I need to sort of get back at, to be like, like it's not something that I don't know, it's something that I'm well aware of, and it's something worthwhile practicing as well. That it's not always about the now. There are just some things that you kind of do to set yourself up for something better in the near future. And I think we're just in a high-paced society or time at the moment where everyone wants things done now, and things to happen
immediate
now.
gratification.
But it's not the case. The bigger, better, and greater things happen, when you wait. And I think the one thing, I know it's spoken about in a later chapter, I don't know if you highlighted, but it was about when the best time to grow a tree is, and there's like, the answer would be 40 years ago, but second best answer is now. Do it now. That's also very interesting, that you to reap fruits, from a tree is not something that happens overnight. You have to plant the seed and wait for a very long time before a tree actually starts producing fruit.
It's like it's the thing that's mentioned often throughout the book as well, which is that idea of consistency and just continuously. I mean, they don't go through this detail in the tree example, but you have to, I guess, maybe taking it back to the garden, you have to continuously nurture the garden in order for it to thrive. And there will be lots of things that come up along the way that try to derail that progress. But you have to continuously nurture it. And like you say, it's only then sometimes quite far down the line that you reap the fruits of that. But often it's those things that are the worthwhile things. Should we go to the crazy idea of the pink wire cable?
Yeah. Also around the sumo wrestler.
Still with the sumo wrestler. So on 170, he says, "You will recall that our friend the sumo wrestler was stark naked, except for a pink wire covering his private parts. The pink wire cable will serve to remind you of the power of self-control and discipline in building a richer and happier and more enlightened life. These sages taught me that the virtue of self-discipline was like that cable wire. You see that when it consists, you will see that it consists of many thin wires placed on top of one another. Alone, each one is flimsy and weak, but together their sum is much greater than their constituent parts, and the cable becomes tougher than iron. Self-control and willpower are similar to this. To build a will of iron, it's essential to take small, tiny acts in tribute to the virtue of personal discipline. Routinely performed, the little acts pile on top of one another and eventually produce an abundance of inner strength. Then on 173, you condition your willpower just as your son conditions his body at the gym. And then further down, are you saying that with the right blend of training and preparation, I could have the same level of willpower as Mahatma Gandhi? Everyone is different. The one fundamental principle that Yogi Raman taught me was that true enlightened people never seek to be like others. Rather, they seek to be superior to their former selves. And then 177. Why do so many people worry and focus on all the negative information in the world? It is because they have not learnt the art of self-control and disciplined thinking. And then 180. There are a couple other exercises I can offer you to liberate the strength of your will and cultivate inner discipline. The first is to start doing the things that you don't like doing. By getting into the habit of exerting your will, you will cease to be a slave to your weaker impulses. And second is a favorite of Yogi Raman's. He used to go the entire day without speaking, except in response to direct questions. And then he says somewhat like a vow of silence. And then lastly on 184, momentum is the answer I'm looking for. Momentum is the secret ingredient of building self-discipline. Like I said, you start off small, whether that means getting up a little earlier, starting to walk around the block every night, or even just training yourself to turn off the television when you have had enough. These small victories create momentum, and that excites you to take larger steps along the path to your highest self. Yeah, I think this part and many other parts, kind of like you said earlier, reminds me of Atomic Habits. And just that idea of making small, tiny little improvements. And as you make those improvements, you sort of build up, in this chapter, you're building up self-discipline.
Oh.
But in other chapters, there's different ideas, but all of them you need to take those small little steps, one little step at a time, and kind of like the wires building up that stronger cable. Each one of those by themselves is kind of worthless to some degree, but you slowly put them together and build up these little tiny virtues or disciplines, and then over time you overall become a more disciplined person, or virtuous person, or whatever the different situation in the different chapter might be. Yeah, don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that, Peter?
Yeah, I think to me another thing that was interesting and also something that I've spoken to I think a few people about is just the whole thing of people, everyone having their own race or path, and it's not great for you to be like, oh, he's my age, he's at this stage in life, I should be there, I think if there was a section that, when it read, I was like, oh, that's quite interesting, to be like, you should strive to be better than your previous self. That's kind of the best person to race against, and I think I know that for me a few years ago, it's something that I'd always said to myself, to be like, I need to be the best version of myself, like daily strive for that. And I think it's a good way for self-improvement. Again, like I said, that those tiny few changes, one of them is you thinking back that, okay, these are my shortfalls, what can I do to be better? By doing that, you actually self-improving. Yeah,
it's something that, again, it's just a continuous thing that you have to keep on trying to do. But yeah. All right, the golden stopwatch. So on page 187. By the time most people figure out what they really want and how to go about attaining it, it's usually too late. 188. By now I had realized that Yogi Raman's mystical fable was nothing more than a series of memory pegs designed to teach Julian the elements of his ancient philosophy for enlightened living, while at the same time helping him remember it. Then further down on that page, and exactly what does the shiny gold stopwatch represent? It is a symbol of our most precious commodity, time. And on 190. Once I heard my father say that it was the busiest people who have time to spare. What do you make of that? I agree. Busy, productive people are highly efficient with their time. They must be in order to survive. Being an excellent time manager doesn't mean that you must become a workaholic. On the contrary, time mastery allows you more time to do the things that you love, things that are truly meaningful to you. And then page 92. The most meaningful things in life should never be sacrificed to those that are less meaningful. Then 195. That brings me to another point. Don't let others steal your time. Be wary of time thieves. Remember what I told you. Don't pick up your phone every time it rings. It is there for your convenience, not the convenience of others. And then 198. Julian had one final thought to share on the subject of time. Perhaps most importantly, John, stop acting like you have 500 years to live. And then lastly, on 201. Surely you will advance along the path of enlightenment. You will come to master the art of personal government. You will see that life for what it is. You will see your life for what it really is, a small blip on the canvas of eternity. And you will come to see clearly who you are and the ultimate purpose of your life, which is, John said, to serve, of course. It will tell you that your calling in life is ultimately selfless service to others in some form or another. Yeah, so I think it's always a helpful reminder, a few different things. The one is just the importance of time and that it's not infinite on this earth. And so we should spend it wisely and not allow things to consume our time that actually are not meaningful. And then the meaningful things in life are something worthwhile thinking about, like what should be taking up our time, which a few times in the story is reiterated. The idea of family and friends and those kinds of things, I think, are vital, important things. And then there's like a little bug that just flew right into my face. Then I think there was one last thing I wanted to mention, but the bug threw me off my train of thought. The last thought is that if we look at the vast sort of stretch of time and picture our little place within it, it kind of sort of becomes something where we start to say, but why am I thinking of myself as so important and focusing so much on myself? The most meaningful thing that I can do is actually to say, how can I participate in this sort of broader grand narrative of life? And the way to do that is in some or other fashion. It's not made clear here what that fashion is, and I don't think it's intended to be made sort of specific or clear, but it's the idea is to serve others, and that's one of the most meaningful ways that you can spend your time. Yeah. Thoughts from your side, Peter?
Yeah, for myself, I think an idea that we've come across before as well in a book about the art of saying no. And I think there was one thing that was mentioned in the book, make other people respect your time. I think that's very important because you get people that always want access to you, but in a sense that they actually don't respect your time, and making it known that this is what I need to do and when is very important. Like he said, like your phone is for your convenience or the convenience of others. Which I don't know if everyone thought like that, the world would also be a weird place.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if I then try to call you, Bill, you look at it and be like, okay, this is not convenient for me. Let me know, But
Yeah.
I think it was more of be very. I know this is just me now imposing my thoughts to be like, just be very mindful when you're taking calls. If you know that something that you can handle later, then you handle it later. And if you think it needs your immediate attention, then go ahead and do that. And I think the mentality of the deathbed is also something that stood out for me to be like. And again, he kind of mentioned that also helps your quality of life to kind of be like, wake up in the morning to be like, okay, I'm grateful for these things, but if today was my last day, what it is that I want to do and how are you going to do it, And I think in so doing, it's you kind of putting yourself first, actually finding what makes you happy and what you need to do or what you need to accomplish by the end of the day to actually satisfy your life, And again, like we've been saying, like there's a lot of ideas that kind of tie together, the one's kind of non-existent within the other, because in also so doing and you waking up and be like, what is it that I'm going to do that will make me happy today, is you actually knowing what your purpose is. You'll be like, this is actually what my purpose is, and at the end of the day, your purpose is what makes you happier, but not in those words, because it kind of says your happiness is from your achievement. How you're going to achieve something is actually if we fulfill your purpose. So it's kind of things that tie together, So yeah.
Yeah, and just sort of taking small steps towards, if you know that going to binge watch, in my case, YouTube, but in other people's case, it might be binge watching TV or something. If you know that that's not going to point you towards the goal that you're sort of striving towards, then try your best to spend less time on that, to cut it off or things. And for different people, it'll be different things, because other people should actually watch more TV because they spend way too much working and they don't spend any time with their family. And watching a good movie as a family can be a really wonderful thing. But there's different things for different people, but trying to identify those ways that you spend your time that are opposed to the thing that you actually sort of value doing, then and also just that idea of the selflessness of how can you, to use a super cheesy example, like rather than watching something, you could make a meal for a friend who's and sort of surprise them with the meal and say, hey, here, or doing some kind gesture, which too often, like I know for myself, it's just get consumed in YouTube, and then I'm like, I don't have time to do anything, and then, but actually I've just thrown my time into the void. I have learned a lot of things on YouTube as well, so YouTube's great, but there's time limits to everything.
Yeah. Like what you're saying actually ties in with the idea of the next chapter, instead of spending time doing, like you're saying, watching YouTube, but cook a meal for something, because the next chapter is about selflessly serving others, helping others and stuff. So, which is essentially that, instead of, and again, like I said, it's things that actually tie together to be like, what's the best use of my time? I can say no to this, but then actually I can, again, like you said, cook a meal which will maybe improve the quality of your relationship with that person,
Yeah. But yeah, I do think it ties nicely in. I'll read through. This one's a little bit shorter, nice, which is nice.
Yeah.
So page 204, it starts off with a quote from William Blake. Everything that lives not alone, not for itself. So the negation idea there makes the sentence complicated. But you don't live for yourself, is the point. And yeah, carrying on with 204. One of the most essential of all the virtues for the enlightened living, or for enlightened living, that I can share with you, John, is this. When all is said and done, no matter what you have achieved, no matter how many of your summer homes, no matter how many summer homes you own, no matter how many cars sit in your driveway, the quality of your life will come down to the quality of your contribution. Does this have something to do with the fresh yellow roses of Yogi Raman's fable? Of course it does. The flowers will remind you of the ancient Chinese proverb, and I really like this proverb. A little bit of fragrance always clings to the hand that gives you the roses. You will always, when you take care of the practice of random acts of kindness daily, your own life becomes far richer and more meaningful. And lastly, on 206, to dramatically improve the quality of your life, you must cultivate a new perspective of why you are here on earth. You must realize that just as you entered the world with nothing, you are destined to leave it with nothing. This being the case, there can only be one real reason to be here: to give yourself to others and to contribute in a meaningful way. Yeah. I really like that idea of giving the rose to someone and that leaving fragrance on your hand. Yeah. The fragrant roses. Don't know if you have any last, I know we kind of chatted about it already, but any last thoughts there before we go on to the last chapter?
No, I think it's just the wisdom, like the first one about so on page 212, the first one is the quality of your life ultimately comes down to the quality of your contribution. Yeah, I just feel like that's, yeah, it's more of you reap what you sow kind of thing,
Yeah.
If you put good in the world, you reap good out of the world, But I always say, funny enough, I always say that's how in my very skewed and very unmatured young days of thinking about Christianity, I thought that's how Christianity worked, to be like, if I do good, then I'll be blessed abundantly type of thing.
If only life was that simple.
Sorry?
I say, if only life was that simple.
Yeah, I know. It is that simple, but again, it's not. What I've learned, though, is that it's not that it's true, but it's not that it's wrong to sort of then say, I'm holding God down to bless me, because, but ultimately, regardless, you just have to do good. I think that's something that I told myself, to be like, you don't know what people are going through. Again, you do not have to voice out in terms where maybe someone's stepping on your toes and whatnot, but to me, I always say, regardless, even in that, and after like reflecting upon that, it doesn't then make me say, oh, they do so little in my life, then I should do little in their lives. No, I will do what I can for them. I will not use it as a trade-off kind of thing. My end goal is just to always do good. Never try and do negative things, in the sense of keep, settling a score or whatnot. It's like people will do what they wish to do. You are responsible for what you do and how you interpret things. So I would do my best every single time to do what is good. And again, that's why even when you go down, it goes the whole techniques of practicing daily acts of kindness. I think that was something for me as well. At a point in life, just make sure you do something kind. And I mean, I think in the book it did mention that at one point how the father says, "Well, did you do anything kind today?" And when the boy says no, the father's like, "No, you need to, go do something." I think we need to treat life like that, to just, it's not that we owe it to anyone, but it's, I think, just for ourselves, to be good and be kind to others. Always, yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, sort of reflecting on the Christianity idea, where, like, that's, in some sense, there's that, and I'm going to mess up the quote, but it's so God first loved us, and that then allows us to be able to love others. And it's, I think, similar here where if you are kind towards others, that also enables them to be kind. It's kind of like the father who raises his son well, like that example, saying, go out, and you didn't do anything specifically caring towards others today, so before you go to bed, go out and do that. Without having that first, we will struggle to go out and do that ourselves. But if we are able to, then that helps both us, because the fragrance of the rose rubs off on us, which is a wonderful thing, but then it also helps others. Should we go on to the last part, the path of diamonds? Okay. So 214. The final element in Yogi Raman's fable. So there's the sumo wrestler that slipped on the shiny gold watch and then fell to the ground. And after that seemed like an eternity, he finally regained consciousness and marveled at the fragrance of the yellow roses in his nose. Then he jumped up on his feet in delight and was astonished to see a long winding path studded with millions of tiny diamonds. Of course, our friend the sumo wrestler took the path, and in doing so lived happily ever after. Then on 215, the seventh and final virtue is about living. The sages of Savannah believed that a truly joyful life and a rewarding life comes only through the process they called living in the now. Then on 216, being engaged in the pursuit that truly challenges you is the surest route to personal satisfaction. But the real key to remember is that happiness is a journey, not a destination. And then a little bit further down, just as the sumo wrestler found lasting fulfillment and joy by walking the path of diamonds, you can have the life you deserve the very moment you start to understand that the path you are currently on is rich with diamonds and other precious treasures. Then on 217, that does not mean that you should stop setting big goals, or does that mean that I should stop setting big goals? No, Julian replied firmly. My point is simply this. Never put off happiness for the sake of achievement. Never put off the things that are important for your well-being and satisfaction to a later time. Today is the day that you enjoy the fruits of your efforts. Today is this day that you seize the moment and live the life that soars. And please never forget the gift of family. Then on 220, you have such great kids, John. Don't miss the forest for the trees. The best gift you could ever give your children is love. And then a little bit further down, the more I thought about it, the harder it hit me. Piano recitals, Christmas plays, Little League championships had all been traded for my professional advancement. What was I doing, I wondered. Was I really sliding down the slippery slope that Julian described? There and then, I resolved to change. Then a bit further down, you can marvel at the diamonds along the way, or you can keep running through the days, chasing an elusive pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that ultimately reveals itself to be empty. And then 224. When I was a young... Okay, so then this is a really nice story. I'm going to read the full story because I think it's very good. And that's close to the end. On 224, when I was a young boy, my father loved to read me a fairy tale known as Peter, which is ironic when I read this. Peter and the Magic Thread. Peter was a very little boy, and everyone loved him, his family, his teachers, his friends. But he did have one weakness. Peter could never live in the moment. Peter constantly daydreamed, never taking time to savor the special moments that filled his days. One morning, Peter was out walking in the forest near his home. Feeling tired, he decided to rest. After only a few minutes of deep sleep, he heard someone calling his name. Peter, Peter. He slowly opened his eyes. He was startled to see a striking woman standing above him. In the woman's wrinkled hand was a magical little ball with a hole in the center, and out of the hole dangled a long golden thread. Peter, she said, this thread is your life. If you pull the thread just a bit, an hour will pass in seconds. If you pull a little harder, whole days will pass in minutes. And if you pull with all your might, months, even years will pass in days. Peter grew very excited at this discovery. I'd like to have it if I may, he asked. The elderly woman quickly reached down and gave the ball with the magic thread to the young boy. The next day, Peter was sitting in the classroom, feeling restless and bored. Suddenly, he remembered his new toy. As he pulled a little bit of the golden thread, he quickly found himself at home, playing in his garden. Realizing the power of the magical thread, Peter soon grew tired of being a schoolboy and longed to be a teenager. With all the excitement of that phase of life would bring. So he pulled out the ball and pulled hard on the golden thread. Suddenly he was a teenager with a very pretty young girlfriend named Elise. But Peter still wasn't content. He never learned to enjoy the moment and explore the simple wonders of this stage of his life, or of every stage of his life. Instead, he dreamed about being an adult. So again he pulled on the thread and many years whizzed by in an instant. Now he found that he had been transformed into a middle-aged adult. Elise was now his wife, and Peter was surrounded with a house full of kids. But Peter also noticed something else. His once black jet black hair, had started to turn grey. And once youthful mother, whom he loved so dearly, had grown old and frail. Once again he pulled the magic thread and waited for changes to appear. Peter now found that he was a 90-year-old man. His thick hair had turned white as snow, and his beautiful young wife Elise had also grown old and passed away a few years earlier. His wonderful children had grown up and left home to lead lives of their own. For the first time in his entire life, Peter realized that he had not taken the time to embrace the wonders of living. I feel empty inside. I've missed the gift of living. You're ungrateful, said the old woman, but still I will give you one last wish. Peter thought for an instant, and then answered hastily, I'd like to go back to being a schoolboy and live my life over again. He then returned to his deep sleep. Again he heard someone calling his name and opened his eyes. Who could it be this time, he wondered. When he opened his eyes, he was absolutely delighted to see his mother standing over his bedside. She looked young, healthy, and radiant. Peter realized the strange woman of the forest had indeed granted his wish, and he had returned to his former life. And then lastly, on 230, many years ago, and this is another story, sort of the final story. Many years ago in ancient India, the Maharaja, I don't know how to pronounce that correctly, wanted to build a great tribute to his wife as a sign of his deep love and affection for her. This man wanted to create a structure the likes of which the world had never seen. that one that would shimmer across the moonlight sky, one that people would admire for centuries to come. Finally, after 22 years of daily gradual progress, the palace of pure marble was complete. Guess what I am speaking of? I have no idea, John said. The Taj Mahal. Like the Taj Mahal, a life overflowing with wonders is built day by day, block by block. Small victories lead to large victories. Tiny incremental changes and improvements, such as those I've suggested, will create positive habits. Positive habits will create results, and results will inspire you towards greater personal change. Begin to live each day as if it was your last, starting today. Learn more, laugh more, and do what you truly love. Yeah, and that's the last bit of that chapter. And for me, I think the idea of that approaching the journey as this thing with all kinds of wonders along the way, I think is a very valuable thing. I think people also they either go the journey route or the destination route, and I think it's nice to have both in mind. Enjoy the destination if you get there. Enjoy the journey as well. There will be difficulties on both ends, but yeah, I think it's a nice idea to say, what are the diamonds along the journey that you can look out for and keep in focus, and yeah, don't wish your life away, even in the difficult times. I think it's worthwhile saying, do I really want to just have it end up being tomorrow because I don't want to deal with today? Or can you cultivate the garden of your mind to think differently and positively about that situation and say, okay, it's difficult, but I'm learning from this, I'm growing. Yeah. Any last thoughts from your side, Peter?
No, I think for me, I think it's just the first story you read as well, to be like, I think so often we've become a generation that doesn't live in the now, You go somewhere, let's say a concert or anything, you want to record instead of actually being present in the moment. You go out somewhere instead of engaging with the people you're with, you on your phone messaging other people or scrolling through things, like you're saying, it's about enjoying the journey and the destination. All of them have their challenges that they come with, but I think it's about being present at the end of the day in everything that you do.
Yeah, and taking those incremental steps. It's not something where you are going to just get there and then it's done and then you are the enlightened person or something like that. It's a process that that you're continuously walking along this journey, and continuously doing those little atomic habits.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Peter? Should people get the book and read it?
Yeah, people should get the book and read it. I think we're always very biased. I think we've never come here and said...
We do choose the books that we read on purpose. We don't blindly just say, oh, let's read this.
So it's like, if we spend our money on this, you also have to go spend your money. No, I think we do actually think about what we're going to read carefully, apart from this where we didn't do that check to see whether, because like I said, it's a popular book, but yeah, we do choose the books, which by default we have to enjoy them, whether we like it or not. No. I'm joking.
I think this is one of those ones where it was more on the side of, it's a sort of fairly popular book that we've heard of and we're both interested to read it and so on. So I think this is one of the ones that we knew obviously a lot less about going into. But I'm really glad that we did read it. I think we'll probably over time go more back to the normal classic self-helps rather than the story self-help genre. If maybe we start a new genre, story self-help. But yeah, I think it's been a really good read. I enjoyed the story, and I found it fairly easy to read, even though I did procrastinate quite a lot. But it was a really nice read.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It was, and like always, go read the book.
And there's a lot more. We obviously went through a lot of the snippets, but I think there's a lot more in it, and it's a worthwhile book to pick up and read. Yeah, thanks, Peter. Until next time.
Yeah, cool. Cheers.